move away from South Africa now. See what's going on in Burkina Faso. The body of Burkina Faso's revolutionary leader, Thomas Sankara, has been reburied in Ouagadougou alongside 12 comrades at the spot of the assassination nearly 30 years ago. Soldiers and community leaders paid tribute during a ceremony yesterday, which has since become a memorial for the former leader, featuring a life-size statue of him pumping his fist in the air.
All the coffins were draped in Burkina Faso flags with a photo beside them. Now, let's quickly tell you that late Thomas Sankara came to power in August 1983 as an army captain at the age of 33, after he and former President Blaise Compaoré led a leftist coup that overthrew a moderate military faction. But his tenure was short-lived after he and a dozen others were shot dead by a hit squad at a meeting of the ruling National Revolutionary Council on October 15, 1987. While Sankara's family was happy that he was finally laid to rest, his brother Paul Sankara said the place of burial was like a slap in their face because of the horrors that happened there.
His wife actually did not show up. His wife and family
and the children, yes,
didn't show up at the burial.
And I think that's quite understandable, because at the end of the day, if you're trying to honor a man who was unfortunately killed, someone who was nicknamed Africa's Che Guevara, and he was someone who was particular about the nation of Burkina Faso, trying to make life better for the people of Burkina Faso, change their name from Upper Volta to Burkina Faso. I did all these things. His family is also very important in the grand scheme of things. It would seem that this was more for the state than it was for the family. And, you know, it would have been nice if they both found a meeting point after all of this time. Because, I mean, the wife was saying that they could have buried him in a garden or in a cemetery, the public cemetery, or just somewhere else other than at the point where he was assassinated.
Yeah, I totally agree. And of course, so the country in the last couple of years, you know, has gone through, you know, some level of chaos or the other. You know, there's currently Ibrahim Traore, who's the head of the military junta, currently in power there. But of course, you know, with relations to Thomas Sankara himself, the family is asking or requested that they would rather have him buried at the public cemetery where his body was originally exhumed.
Yeah,
you know,
in 2015.
Exactly, not in the site where he was killed, you know, because that doesn't necessarily bring back, you know, the best or the fondest memories for them. So I'm sure that's the reason that they stayed away from the burial. But at the same time, you know, will there ever be justice, you know, for the family of Thomas Sankara? Blaise Compaoré, as Compaoré, I try to pronounce it the French way. You know, of course, has been sentenced, you know, to life in prison in absentia. He currently lives in Côte d'Ivoire. You know, a few months ago, he put out an apology to the people of Burkina Faso
after vehemently denying being involved in the murder of Thomas Sankara.
Yes.
After ensuring that the conversations about Thomas Sankara were treated as taboo in all the 27 years of his time as president of Burkina Faso.
Yeah.
So he wasn't actually, if you look at the facts before us, and many would say that he wasn't actually fair to Thomas Sankara, and the fact that he's still walking a free man might not, you know, interpret justice as justice should be, because if someone committed a crime, the person should be made to pay for it.
Absolutely. And, you know, I think that these are some of the things that maybe would bring proper closure to Miriam Sankara, his wife, and of course, you know, family. Helping them select where he will be buried. Of course, he is obviously a national figure, so yeah, the country would be able to chip in, you know, with those decisions. But the family also has a say. But I feel like, you know, proper justice, you know, and of course, someone being sentenced to jail or to, you know, to death or whatever it is, you know, that their legal system provides, would maybe make more sense to them. And these things, for me, are just a continuous, you know, reminder of the pain that they have felt for the last 27 or 30 years as a family. And so, you know, they are just, it feels like, you know, you have a wound, and then every couple of years someone opens up that wound again and then sticks some, you know, hot metal into it. So it's I understand, you know, where the family is coming from, but of
I
course,
completely
you know,
understand. I mean, the state says that they're doing it because he was a member of the military, and I mean, he was the commander in chief at the time, and they're doing it as a result of national interest and security imperatives. However, we know that beyond talking about the role of Blaise Compaoré, there's also the fact that sometimes you find that people who have lost loved ones have this tradition of wanting to do like remembrance or memorial, go to the grave site, but the family of Sankara would never be able to do that again.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, to go drop flowers. And those things are things that,
Yeah,
I mean, in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't really, it's not changing anything. The dead is gone. But it helps you in some way feel some form of connection to the person, relieve fond memories, and just honor them in your own way. But the family would never be able to do that again.
Absolutely. Well, there you have it. He has been buried yesterday, Thursday, of course, more than 30 years since his death. And of course, I will say once again, rest in peace to Thomas Sankara, popularly known as Africa's Che Guevara. Let's, of course, take you through some of the big stories across East Africa. And joining us this morning is Ugandan-based journalist Daron Bartlett. He joins us from Kampala. Good morning, Daron. Good to see you, as always, every Friday.
Good morning. I'm always happy to hear from you guys and watch you and enjoy your banter and conversations and information.
Tell us about Thomas Sankara if you have a little bit to chip in.
I would say, yeah, he's one of the greatest that Ugandan learns from. He was here in Uganda before, met the President Museveni, discussed on a number of issues on how they can change, how they can literally transit from the colonial era and the effects of colonialism to a post-independence that, helps the people and work for the people of Africa. He had his own ideologies on how to develop his country and, took some tough measures and you see the connection that was cut off and the support that was cut off from supporting his country. And it was a hard one. Most African countries actually, whereas they look at him as a hero, they all feared, most of them feared to take the route that he has taken, that look, we don't have to depend on the West or European countries for donations and development in our countries. These are things that we can do ourselves. And that was some of the things that sparked off conflict between him and his alleged killers, who then overtake power after. But that gospel, after a very long time, then started to sink in into African leaders. You can see Paul Kagame uses him as a reference. President Museveni uses him as a reference in most of the times in his addresses. Kaunda talked about him even when Kaunda was here a little bit earlier than him by the time he came to power. But most presidents have looked at him as a point of reference in the things that he fought for in terms of, for the country, especially in the post-independence era. And are we regretting some of those things that were not done? Yeah, and we're living the consequences of some of the things that we did copy from him.
All right, well, once again, rest in peace to him. Now, let's get straight into our conversations for today. The United Nations, Antonio Guterres, says 2020 was the deadliest year for Somali civilians since 2017, of course, due to the Al-Shabaab insurgency. Can you, provide some overview of the security situation in Somalia since 2017? And, maybe also share details on how the government is somehow, somewhere addressing the recent surge in insurgent attacks by Al-Shabaab, which of course has been the reason behind those figures, naming, of course, the deadliest civilian attacks in Somalia since 2017 to 2020.
When you look at the roadmap to having a democratic state in Somalia, it took quite a lot of time. But ever since the government, the previous government before the current government decided that we have to develop a democratic route to electing a president, insurgencies started to happen every now and then because some of the things that they needed to address was one, security, that you cannot have a democratic state without having security. And the current president Mohammed came through and said, look, these are the things that I'm going to address. Now, ever since, even before actually he was elected as a president, we saw the Al-Shabaab killing quite a number of people. In fact, the highest insurgents they had when they were actually having elections, which was about 3 kilometers away from where they were voting from, the members of parliament were voting from for the next president, that is last year. So we saw quite a number of people dying. We saw hotels being attacked. In fact, the highest number of people that died there was about 153. And that is a jump in terms of about 200% of the people who have been killed. And all these have been civilians. And when you put together pieces and bits, now you're not even calculating. If you don't even add this year alone in January and February of the insurgencies that have happened, you see that a number of people and a lot of unsettlement is happening in Somalia, displacing quite a number of people. About 1.3 people have been displaced within. 600,000 people have fled the country, going to neighboring Ethiopia, coming to Kenya. Others have actually come to Uganda. Others going to Djibouti, which is just the neighboring country in the north there. But also, if you look at the other part that is, or the other part of Somalia that is in the northern part of Somalia, which is they call Somaliland, who declare themselves as a different state, are also having the same wars with the main government. They're fighting for that kind of liberation to let them go and become an independent state. Now, that whole bits and pieces of, if you put them together, of insecurity, have put a high alert on the government, and the numbers don't look to be going down. Instead, they're going up, and the UN is concerned on what should be done to stop these kind of insurgencies. But let's look at why they are happening now compared to then. Now, America, which the U.S. government, the African Union, the clan militias who, they are armed, though even they're not against. They work for the government as a support team, as a kind of people who come together and say, we're going to help the government fight this. Plus the government army itself that has been trained in Eritrea and other people trained in Ethiopia came together and decided to make a conclusion that they have to recapture areas that were taken over by Al-Shabaab. And indeed, they have made some progress. We've seen airstrikes by the United States, drones killing some heads of the Al-Shabaab. And that has provoked now the Al-Shabaab to carry out attacks in different places. Car bombs have been staged in Somalia capital. Even this week, actually yesterday but one, the other day, we saw a situation of a hostage situation that saw some civilians being killed, but also the Al-Shabaab militias being killed. So they have continuously staged these attacks in civilian places that are highly populated, and they've killed quite a number of people. So the question is then, how do we prevent such things to happen? They just have to intensify the security drills by the AU with the support of the United States there. We've seen Uganda has recruited the ex-army officials, ex-army people, who they call the veterans, have been called back into service, and they're sending them to Somalia to ensure that they keep more peace in Somalia. Uganda has the most experienced army in that region who are deployed there. The army of the KDF are also sending in some support. We've seen the army of Burundi going into there, though there's a little bit worried that there's going to be a little bit of stretch in terms of capacity for the East African armies. Remember, they're already in DRC trying to do something. And so they're trying to remobilize and see that they take over the places that Al-Shabaab had taken over previously.
I mean, there's a lot that needs to be done there. We do hope that some sense of calm can come to that region. But let's take the conversation this time to Kenya and talk about the alarming allegations of sexual abuse on tea estates supplying some of Britain's most popular brands, following the BBC's report that claimed 70 women were sexually abused on these farms. What is being done about this?
That there was action that was taken. I saw the public prosecutor, the head of public prosecution, Mr. Nadir Haj, who wrote to police and wrote to the IGP of police, that is Mr. Jaffet, and told him that they should carry out investigation, and he needs a file on his report on his desk in the next 7 days to see what action has been taken to ensure that they bring justice to these people. Look at the situations. If you look at, if you take time and watch the documentary, you'll see that some of these women they alleged have been raped, they have been infected with HIV. In fact, one of the women who came out and said that she was infected with HIV, and the same supervisor went ahead and raped a 14-year-old girl who was working on a farm. So it has been one of the most, I would say, blown out investigation that has been done on sex for jobs, or sex for wages, or sex expectations, depending on how you want to bring it out and emphasize on that. But the members of parliament have instituted their own committee to investigate these companies on what they have been doing. And in fact, 10 years ago, one of these companies, Unilever, had the same allegations brought before them, and they developed a zero sexual harassment policy in the company, but also had put together a certain policy to ensure that there are no relationships that happen in their places of work. However, how this happened under their noses is something that they are so shocked to see, and in fact, they've suspended about 3 people so far. But that's not enough. The police needs to ensure that these women are protected. Now, the members of parliament, especially the women's side, like the one who represents the Rift Valley, she says that some laws should be made so hard as they should be as strict as a death penalty for crimes like this that have been committed. Because when someone infects you with HIV, it is too high. It's as equal as murdering someone, because then you're sending someone into a depression, into a situation that they have to worry much more about their lives and forget about, and they don't live the normal lives that they've been living, especially when it comes with things like stigmatization and a lot more. So there should be, the members of parliament are looking at how do we make this a crime, and a very grave crime with grave penalties, to ensure that some of such things never get to happen again in Kenya. It will be a process, but we hope that by next Tuesday, the Director of Prosecution and Adil will have a way forward on how to prosecute these people.
It's really sad, and I'm really hoping it's not one of those stories that will be swept under the rug, or some level of diplomacy would make it eventually not these victims not get the justice that they deserve. I really hope so, but we're gonna give it a week. That's what we're gonna do, and then hopefully next week Friday, when we bring you in, there will be some updates, and we'll have better information about this. Thank you very much, Daron, for your time as usual on of course the East Africa Report. See you again.